Hi, guys. I am going to just talk a little bit about what is heredity. And so you should see on It's Learning, our new topic is heredity and genetics. And this is going to be lessons for this week, May 4th through May 7th. Just a reminder, I'm available for questions Monday through Friday via email, It's Learning Messenger. I'm also on Zoom at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. For about 30 minutes. So if you have a question, you can stop in and join me, and there's different login information. So on Monday today, your assignment is to, we're going to try to answer this question: what is heredity? We know we've already talked about genes, and we talked about in mitosis and meiosis how in mitosis you need exact copies of those genes to go to each cell, and in meiosis those cells have half of the genes because when they combine they're going to have a full set of genes. So this is stuff that makes us unique, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that happens. So hopefully you guys this will spark your interest in genetics and heredity. It definitely doesn't teach you everything exactly. So I want to make sure I encourage you to go through the vocabulary set on Quizlet. It's the Heredity 1 set. And I'm going to have my screencast listed here, but obviously you've already found it if you're listening to this. And these slides on Mendelian genetics, it's what my screencast is going to go through. Now, it is a work in progress. I've had some computer issues, so I'm still working on that, but it will have the notes for today, and then you'll just need to refresh those Google Slides throughout the week. I encourage you to get notebook paper or piece of paper, a pen or pencil, and write down some things as you study. What words are you struggling with, or what questions do you have? And there's going to be some Punnett squares that I'm going to ask you to solve. On Tuesday this week, you have an ed puzzle and a quiz is. There's about 30 of you who've already joined the class in quizzes. So you can log into quizzes at joinmyquiz.com, or you can use this link. I need you guys to do that, and you can take it up to 2 times. You got to get a 65% or better. If you don't after 2 times, please let me know, and I can offer you an alternative code. So Wednesday, I'm going to do another screencast, some more information on Google Slides. On Thursday, another quizzes. And again, this is really just what's going to help me, collect some work from you rather than a worksheet. You're going to be doing this stuff here in quizzes. If you're struggling with any of this, this is a great day. Thursday, this can be challenging. If you're struggling, you're not really getting it, you need to drop into my office hours. So you want to make sure you get to that early. And then on Friday, join me. It's optional at 11 a.m. for a Kahoot or a Quizlet Live. I'd love to go over some things from the week. There will be no 2 p.m. office hours on Friday, so just 11 a.m. Join me. And then you do need to do this ed puzzle. It's about 7 minutes, and it will be due by Sunday night at midnight. So that's your week in a nutshell. Okay, so we're going to go into this slideshow about Mendelian genetics. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of genetics. And it all started with a monk named Gregor Mendel. And Mendel was in a monastery, and he had this really elaborate garden, and he grew peas. And he was studying the inheritance of these different peas. He noticed there were tall peas, short peas, and at the time there were different theories of how we inherited traits. So there were 2 different theories. The blending theory was that offspring were a straight mix of parents. And then there was this particulate theory that traits are inherited as particles, and the offspring get a different piece. So here you have a cute little golden doodle that you can tell is a mix of its parents. So when we think about traits, there's different variety. So you have acquired traits, and acquired is something that you learn. It's taught, versus inherited is something that you truly you have no control over. So maybe Acquired may also be an environmental factor. So here's a question for you. A child has a scar, blue eyes, and a missing tooth. Which statement best describes these traits? So let's look through them. A scar, blue eyes, and a missing tooth. Which of those are acquired? That's something that happened in their lifetime. And which of those is something they inherited from their parents? Okay, so let's just double check here. So you should have said C, a scar is acquired, blue eyes are inherited, and a missing tooth is acquired. That's through the environment. So let's talk about maybe learning a piano. Is that acquired or inherited? So Gregor Mendel was known as the father of genetics, and this is where the vocabulary comes into play. Genetics is the study of heredity, and heredity is actually the passing of traits from parents to offspring. So sometimes students say, well, why do some people call this unit, genetics? Why do other people call it heredity? So genetics is actually the study of heredity, the study of how we pass on traits to our offspring. So here's a nice picture of Gregor Mendel in his garden. So Mendel actually worked with peas, and he really lucked out. This was a pretty simple organism for him to study. It had a few traits, and all of the traits kind of really followed a similar pattern. And he looked at, this is the classic example, the tall versus the short plant, or a straight pod and a wrinkled pod, a round pea and a wrinkled pea. Some peas were green, others were yellow. Some pods were green, some pods were yellow, and then some flowers were white and some were purple. And that's where he was wondering, well, what was causing this? So here's the traits in a little bit of a larger picture. And he always seemed to see this, that there were these two outcomes that were possible. So what he knew was that pea plants can be self-fertilized or cross-fertilized, or self-pollinated or cross-pollinated, because plants have both male and female parts. So you can see these are the male parts and this is the female part, and these little green dots are pollen. And pollen, which is kind of what a lot of us are suffering from right now, that's plant sperm. And so cross-pollination meant this plant would pollinate this plant. So Mendel wanted to use this to his advantage, and he wanted to control the pollination. So what he did was he would remove the male parts from this plant and keep the female part, and then he would remove the female plant and remove the female part and keep the male part, and he would actually control the fertilization. So what he created was what he called true breeding plants. He always created plants that looked like themselves. What he found was that the offspring of true breeding plants were something called hybrids, or another term for that is heterozygotes. So I'm going to have you take a look here. The pollen here is purple. This one is white. All of the offspring, when he would pollinate these plants, would be purple. And you're going to notice this F1. F1 is first filial. So it's the first generation of offspring. And we often call these the parent generation or P generation. So Mendel started to come to some conclusion that some traits are dominant over other traits. So, for example, tall and short, all tall offspring were a result of that heterozygous. They were all tall. So he started to come up with some theories here, and he said that tall is the dominant trait and short is the recessive trait. And the recessive trait can sometimes get hidden when there is a dominant trait present. And you're going to notice that he used the same letter here, the letter T. And when he wanted to represent the dominant trait, he would use a capital T. When he wanted to represent the recessive trait, he would use a lowercase t. So Mendel discovered that each trait is controlled by two factors. Those factors are alleles. And this should be a recap for you. Genes are factors that determine your traits. and genes are located on chromosomes. So we have a picture here of a chromosome, and there's a different segment, and that segment is like gene 1 might have been for flower color, and gene 2 may have been for plant height, and that would be segments of DNA. And then you have 2 copies. You have 1 copy from your mom and 1 copy from your dad. So here is an image. So here's your 1 chromosome. And let's say this one is from the female and this one is from the male. Okay, so this would have been in the egg, this would have been in the sperm. But on each of those chromosomes, there is a region, a gene, we call it a locus. So it's the location for that gene for flower color. This chromosome has the allele, the version for purple flowers. This one has the version for white flowers. So when we talk about alleles, I always like to make the analogy of like your gaming stations. Like Xbox has different versions. They have the 360, they have the Xbox One, they have the original Xbox. So an allele is just a version of a gene. And in this case, there were 2 versions for flower colors. There was a purple version and a white version. We call them alleles, though. Now, this is, again, going back to that idea that you have that matching pair of chromosomes, one from mom, one from dad, and those are homologous pairs. So you always inherit 2 copies of a gene. This is what can be tricky when the gene has a dominant allele, no matter what the second chromosome might be. If this is recessive, this dominant allele may overshadow it. So just a quick check. What do we know so far? So you may want to pause yourself. This is where you may want to put some things down in your notes. So the father of genetics is Gregor Mendel. Genetics is the study of heredity, which is how traits are passed from generation to generation. Mendel studied what organism? Pea plants. Number 4, if one trait covers up another one, we say that it is dominant. The other one that is covered up is recessive. Whoops. A true breeding plant is one that can only produce plants. Can't quite see my answer there. So you guys are going to have to figure that one out on your own. I think it's going to be a heterozygous. And so this is where we're going to stop for today. Some future pages are under construction. So again, you want to come back on Wednesday and there'll be a screencast that will go through some more information. But after you study your vocabulary, and if you need to watch the screencast again, tomorrow will have practice and quizzes to kind of go over some of this information. Again, feel free to stop in and ask questions if you have any.